The gate closed in my face with a sound I will remember until the day I die. Not a slam exactly, more like a decision. A quiet, final decision made by a man who used to sit on my knee when he was 5 years old and now stood on the other side of that iron with his chin lifted and his mouth set. My cousin Vincent looked at me through the bars the way you look at something that wandered off a highway. Not cruel exactly, worse than cruel, indifferent. And behind him, through the front window of the house that I had bought and paid for and kept standing for the last 12 years without anyone in it knowing it was me, I could see my mother. My mother, Mary Whitfield, 71 years old, moving through the kitchen with a dish towel over her shoulder like a woman who worked there instead of a woman who owned every brick of it. Hit like if you've ever been made invisible by the people you fed. Drop your city in the comments so I can see where this story travels tonight. Because the part that broke me wasn't the gate. The gate was easy. The part that broke me was watching my own mother carry a tray to my cousin Vincent and his sister Rachel while they laughed on the sofa, and knowing that they had been doing this to her for years and I had not been there to see it. My name is James Whitfield. I am 43 years old. And 15 years ago, I left the small Georgia town of Ashfield with $200 in my pocket, a duffel bag with 3 shirts in it, and a promise to myself that I would either come back with something to show for it or I would not come back at all. My father had died the spring before. Aneurysm. Sudden. No warning. He was 58 years old, and he collapsed in the driveway of the same house I was now being turned away from, and the ambulance took 19 minutes to reach him because Ashfield is that kind of town. By the time they got there, he was gone. My mother stood in the driveway in her nightgown with her hand over her mouth, and my Aunt Delilah, my father's sister, was already inside the house going through his desk drawer. That is the honest first fact of this story. Before the body was cold, Delilah was in the desk drawer. I remember it because I saw her through the window when I came back from the hospital. She had a stack of my father's papers in her lap, and she looked up and saw me and did not even have the decency to look ashamed. I left 3 months after we buried him. There was nothing keeping me in Ashfield. My mother told me to go. She sat me down at the kitchen table, the same kitchen table Vincent's mother would eventually take, along with the china cabinet and the silver and every framed photograph of my father she could carry out in a single afternoon, and my mother said, "James, this town is going to eat you if you stay. Go make something of yourself. Come home when you're ready to be a whole man." That was the last real conversation we had face to face. 15 years ago. She was 56 then. Sharp eyes, steady hands. A woman who had been the school teacher for the 3rd grade at Ashfield Elementary for 22 years and who had never in her life owed anyone a dime. I did what she told me. I went to Atlanta, then Houston, then Denver. I worked construction, then I worked dispatch, then I worked management, and then I started a logistics company with a man named Owen Halbrook, who is now one of the 3 people in the world I would trust with the PIN code to my life. 12 years after I left Ashfield, that company was worth just north of $40 million, and I owned 62% of it. 2 years after that, the number was bigger. Big enough that I do not say it out loud in mixed company because saying it out loud changes how people look at you, and I have learned the hard way what that change looks like on a person's face. But here is the thing about money that no one tells you. Here is the thing about money that no one tells you. It doesn't just change your life. It changes what you can see about other people. When you are broke, people show you one face. When you are comfortable, they show you another. And when you have real money, the kind that doesn't run out, the kind that could buy the town you grew up in twice over and still have enough left to keep the lights on, they show you a third face. And that third face is the one that tells you who they actually are. That is the face I wanted to see on my own family before I walked back into my mother's kitchen and told her I was home for good. Because I had been sending money for years. That is the part of the story I need you to understand before I tell you about the gate. I had been sending money quietly, carefully, through a lawyer in Savannah named Marcus Reed, who set up a trust in my mother's name and made sure she never had to ask for a thing. Property taxes, paid. Roof repair after the hailstorm in 2019, paid. New water heater in 2021, paid, a monthly stipend that I told my mother was a widow's benefit from a pension fund my father had contributed to. She believed me because she had no reason not to, and because she had never asked how much was in the account, only whether the bills were covered. That was my mother. She had spent her entire life not asking for more than she needed. But somewhere along the way, other people started asking for her. I started to notice it about 4 years ago. Small things at first. My mother would mention in a phone call that Vincent was staying at the house for a little while, just until he got back on his feet. Vincent was my Aunt Delilah's son, 29 years old at that time. He had been fired from 3 jobs in 18 months and had, according to my mother, hit a rough patch. A little while turned into 6 months. 6 months turned into a year. Then his sister Rachel moved in, 31 years old, freshly divorced from a man in Macon who had, in my mother's words, done her wrong. And then Delilah herself started coming by twice a week for what she called family dinners, which as far as I could tell mostly involved Delilah eating my mother's cooking and leaving without doing the dishes. I asked Marcus to look into it quietly. Marcus is a careful man. He has been my lawyer for 11 years, and he does not do sloppy work. He hired a woman named Denise Aldridge, a private investigator based in Atlanta who specializes in what she calls domestic financial situations. Denise spent 2 months in Ashfield in the spring of last year. She rented a small house 4 blocks from my mother's, drove a beige Buick that looked like it belonged to a woman visiting her sister, and did her work. The report she sent Marcus was 41 pages long. I read it in one sitting in my office in Denver on a Wednesday evening in June, and by the time I got to page 30, I had to stand up and walk to the window because my hands were shaking too badly to hold the paper still. Vincent had taken out 2 credit cards in my mother's name. Rachel had convinced my mother to co-sign a car loan for a used Nissan that Rachel then wrecked and abandoned. Delilah had somehow gotten her name added to the deed of the property back in 2020, a maneuver that involved a notary who was her second cousin, and a signature that Denise's handwriting expert was 92% sure was forged. My mother did not know about any of this, or if she knew about some of it, she had not said a word to Marcus, and Marcus was checking in with her every quarter under the guise of managing the pension. I sat in that office with a view of the mountains and I made a decision. I was not going to call. I was not going to send a letter. I was not going to fly into the small regional airport an hour outside Ashfield and rent a sensible sedan and drive up to that house in a clean shirt with a bouquet of flowers. I was going to walk in as nobody. I told Owen my plan on a Thursday morning over coffee in the conference room of our headquarters, and he did not say anything for almost a full minute. Owen is not a man given to long silences. He is the kind of person who thinks out loud, who makes decisions the way other people make sandwiches, who has never in 11 years of partnership taken more than 30 seconds to answer a serious question. So when he sat there stirring his coffee with a plastic stick and looking out at the parking lot, I knew he was working something out. "James," he finally said, "you are talking about spending 3 days pretending to be homeless in front of your own mother. Are you sure you understand what that is going to do to you?" "I understand exactly what it is going to do to me." "Do you?" I looked at him. Owen has known me since I was 32 years old. He was at my 35th birthday. He was at the hospital when my appendix ruptured in 2019. He was the one who drove me home the night I found out my father's grave marker had been vandalized by teenagers with spray paint, and I sat on the curb outside my apartment building for 2 hours because I did not have the strength to walk inside. Owen knows me. And Owen was telling me in the careful way that friends tell each other hard things that he did not think I was ready for what I was about to do. "I am not asking you to like it," I said. "I am asking you to help me set it up." He nodded once. "Then I will help you set it up." The setup took 3 weeks. Marcus handled the legal side. He had already been quietly building a case since Denise's report came in, but now he accelerated. He filed for a formal review of the deed transfer with the county recorder's office in Ashfield, working through a proxy attorney so no one there would connect the inquiry to me. He pulled records on both credit cards Vincent had opened in my mother's name. He documented the car loan Rachel had co-signed and abandoned, and he began drafting a series of documents that, when the moment came, would land like a stack of bricks on Delilah's kitchen table. The physical side of the plan was handled by a man named Cornelius Bright, who runs a security firm in Charlotte and who has done discreet work for me twice before. Cornelius arranged the driver, a former state trooper named Wesley Pike, who has the particular kind of patience that comes from 22 years of sitting in a patrol car watching people make bad decisions. Wesley would drive the Rolls-Royce Ghost that I keep for occasions that require a certain kind of statement. The car would stay parked 2 streets over during the day and would appear at the gate only when I called for it. Cornelius also arranged the clothes. Actual clothes from an actual shelter in Charlotte, washed but not repaired, with the particular smell and texture of fabric that has lived a hard life. He arranged the shoes. He arranged, at my specific request, a coat that had a hole in the left elbow the exact size of a quarter. The last piece was the appearance. I stopped shaving 3 weeks before I flew to Georgia. I stopped cutting my hair. I did not sleep well in those weeks, which helped. By the time I landed at the small airport outside Ashfield on a Tuesday afternoon in October, I looked at myself in the bathroom mirror of the rental terminal, and I did not recognize the man looking back. My beard had come in gray in patches I had not known were gray. My eyes were tired in a way that no amount of concealer could have hidden even if I had been the kind of man who wore concealer. My cheekbones stood out because I had lost 11 pounds in those 3 weeks without meaning to. Wesley met me at a gas station outside town. He handed me the clothes in a plastic bag from a grocery store. I changed in the bathroom while he stood outside the door drinking a bottle of water. When I came out, he looked at me for a long moment. "You want me to say anything?" he asked. "No," I said. "Just wait for the call." I started walking toward my mother's house. Ashfield had not changed much in 15 years. That was the first thing I noticed. The same water tower on the west side of town with the same faded blue paint. The same feed store on Route 12 with the same handwritten sign in the window advertising a discount on chicken scratch. The same bench outside the diner where old men had been sitting since before I was born, and where 3 of them were sitting still, wearing the same kind of caps their fathers had probably worn. The world had moved 15 years forward everywhere else, and Ashfield had stayed exactly where I left it. I walked past the bench, and one of the old men looked at me and looked away without a flicker of recognition, and I thought, this is going to work. My mother's house sat at the end of Magnolia Lane, a long, narrow street lined with pecan trees that dropped their nuts on the sidewalk every October. I remembered picking them up as a boy with a small metal bucket, and my father teaching me to crack them between 2 flat stones instead of using the fancy nutcracker my mother kept in the drawer. The trees were bigger now. Everything else was smaller. The Coleman house across the street looked like it had shrunk. The Peterson house next door, where I had played spaceship as a child, seemed like a dollhouse. Only my mother's house looked the same size because I had paid to have the roof replaced and the siding redone and the whole front porch rebuilt when it started sagging in 2020. My mother had told me the money was coming from a homeowner's insurance settlement. It was coming from me. The gate was new. I noticed that first. It was a black iron gate with a decorative scroll along the top, and it had been installed across the driveway sometime in the last 2 years without my knowing. That did not sit right with me. My mother had never wanted a gate. She had always said gates made a house look like it did not trust its neighbors. Someone else had put that gate there, and I had a good idea who. I stopped at the sidewalk about 15 feet from the gate, and I stood there for a long moment. Not because I was rehearsing what to say. I had rehearsed what to say for 3 weeks. I stopped because I could see my mother through the front window. She was in the living room, bent over the coffee table, and she was polishing it with a cloth. My mother, 71 years old, on her hands and knees, polishing a coffee table in her own house, while Vincent lay on the sofa behind her with his feet on the armrest and his phone held up in front of his face. I saw him laugh at something on the screen without ever looking at her. I felt something rise up in my chest that was not the plan. The plan had been to stay calm. The plan had been to observe. The plan had been to remember that I was a 43-year-old man with a legal team and a private investigator and every card I could possibly need, and that the only way to make this right was to see the full picture before I acted. But standing on that sidewalk watching my mother on her hands and knees, I understood for the first time what Owen had been trying to tell me in the conference room. I made myself walk to the gate. I put my hand on the iron. It was cold. I rang the small bell that had been installed beside it, which was also new, and I waited. Through the window I saw Vincent lift his head. He said something to someone I could not see, and then a moment later Rachel came into view. Rachel was 32 now. She had been a pretty girl when I left. She was still pretty, but there was something in her face that had not been there before, a kind of hardness around the mouth, a set to the jaw that reminded me of her mother Delilah. She looked out the window at me. She frowned. She said something to Vincent. Vincent got up. He came out the front door and down the front walk with the particular walk of a man who has decided in advance that whoever is at the gate is not worth his time. "Yeah," he said through the bars. "Help you." I looked at Vincent through the bars. He was taller than I remembered. He had my Uncle Raymond's build, thick through the shoulders, soft around the middle in the way of a man who had never had to work with his hands for more than an afternoon at a stretch. He was wearing a golf shirt with a small embroidered logo I recognized as belonging to a country club 2 counties over that had a 5-year waiting list and an initiation fee that started at $18,000. I had a very good idea whose money had bought that membership. It had not been Vincent's. "Ma'am, inside," I said. I made my voice hoarse. I had been practicing that too in the hotel room in Charlotte, coughing until my throat felt raw enough to change the sound of it. "I was told she sometimes has a plate for folks passing through. My name is Ray." That was the name I had picked. Ray. It was my uncle's name. I chose it because I wanted to see if it would move something in Vincent's face. Nothing moved. He looked at me the way you look at a piece of furniture on the curb, deciding whether it is worth picking up or not. "Who told you that?" "Fellow at the diner on Route 12. Said the lady on Magnolia Lane was kind to folks in need." Vincent snorted. Not a laugh, a snort, short and dismissive. "Well, whoever told you that was misinformed. This is a private residence. We do not do handouts here. Move along." Behind him, on the porch, Rachel had appeared. She stood in the doorway with her arms crossed, and she was staring at me with the kind of open contempt that people usually save for stray dogs that get into their garbage. She said, loud enough for me to hear, "Vincent, do not open that gate. Do not even talk to him. Just tell him to go." "I'm handling it," Vincent said over his shoulder. Then to me, "You heard my sister. Move along." "I do not want money," I said. "Just a piece of bread." "Anything?" "There is a shelter in Waynesboro," Vincent said. 40 miles east. They serve dinner at 6. If you start walking now, you can probably make it by tomorrow." I stood there. I did not move. I wanted to see how far he would take it. And I wanted my mother to hear us, because I could see her through the window now, standing up from the coffee table, wiping her hands on the dish towel, looking toward the front of the house with the particular alertness of a woman who has heard voices at her own gate. She came to the door. She stepped past Rachel, who put a hand on her arm and said something I could not hear. My mother said something back and kept walking. She came down the porch steps and she came down the front walk and she stopped beside Vincent at the gate. And I looked at my mother's face for the first time in 15 years. She had grown old. That was the first thing, not in the way I had prepared myself for. I had known she was 71. I had seen photographs. Marcus had sent me a photograph in the spring, taken by Denise from across the street with a long lens, and in that photograph my mother had looked tired but recognizable, still my mother, still the woman who had raised me. In person, she looked older than that photograph. Her hair was fully white now, pulled back in a low bun, and there were lines around her eyes that I did not remember, and a slight tremor in her left hand that she covered by holding the dish towel with both hands. But her eyes were the same, sharp, brown, steady, teacher's eyes, eyes that had looked at 8-year-olds every day for 22 years and known exactly which one was lying about the missing pencil. She looked at me through the bars. "Vincent," she said quietly, "go inside. Aunt Mary, I am handling this. Go on back in. I will tell him to leave." "Vincent." Her voice was still soft, but it was the voice I remembered from the third-grade classroom. It was the voice that had told 9-year-old boys to sit down and open their reading books and had been obeyed for 2 decades without ever being raised. I said, "Go inside." Vincent looked at her. He hesitated. Then he turned and walked back up to the house. My mother waited until Vincent was on the porch. She waited until Rachel had followed him inside, pulling the door behind her with the kind of sharp thud that is meant to be heard. Then she turned back to me and she looked at me through the bars of the gate she had never asked for, and she said, "You have not eaten today, have you?" It was not a question. It was a statement, the way she used to say things when I was a boy. "You have not brushed your teeth. You have not finished your homework. You are not going out in that shirt." Statements of fact from a woman who had already made up her mind about what she was seeing. "No, ma'am," I said. My voice cracked on the ma'am, and I let it. I let it because I was not entirely acting. Something in the way she was looking at me had gotten past all 3 weeks of preparation, and all 41 pages of Denise's report, and all the careful staging of Wesley and the Rolls-Royce parked 2 streets over. She was looking at me the way my mother had always looked at me when I came home hungry. "Wait here," she said. She turned and walked back up to the house. I watched her go. She moved slowly. Not the slowness of an old woman, but the slowness of a woman who was tired in a deeper way, who was carrying something on her shoulders that she was not going to set down anytime soon. She went in through the front door. Through the window, I saw her cross the living room to the kitchen. Vincent was standing in the kitchen doorway with his arms crossed, and I could see him saying something to her, gesturing with one hand toward the front of the house. My mother did not answer him. She just went to the pantry and got out a loaf of bread, and then she went to the refrigerator and got out a small container of what I recognized as leftover chicken, and then she got out a jar of something, and she put it all in a paper grocery bag with the calm efficiency of a woman who was doing what she had decided to do and did not care what anyone in the room thought about it. Vincent said something else. She did not answer him. She came back out. She walked down the front walk with the grocery bag in her hands. She did not open the gate. She passed the bag through the bars. "There is a sandwich in the container," she said. "The bread is fresh. There is soup in the jar, still warm. You do not have a can opener, I am guessing, so I put it in a jar, screw top." "Ma'am, there is a park 2 blocks east," she said. "Turn right at the corner, bench under the big oak tree. You can eat there, it is quiet. No one will bother you. Ma'am, God bless you." She looked at me. She held my eyes for a long moment through the bars, and her face did not change, but something in her eyes did. Something small. Something that I would think about for the next 3 days and would not fully understand until she told me herself, later, sitting at her own kitchen table with a cup of coffee in her hands. "You come back tomorrow if you need to," she said. "Same time. I will have something for you." "Yes, ma'am." She turned and walked back to the house. She did not look back at me. She went up the porch steps and she went inside, and I saw her walk past Vincent without looking at him, and I saw Vincent say something to her back that she did not respond to, and then she disappeared into the kitchen. I walked away with the paper grocery bag in my hands. I did not go to the park. Not right away. I walked 2 blocks and then I turned down a small side street and I sat on the curb behind a hedge where I could not be seen from the house, and I opened the bag. The sandwich was wrapped in a napkin. The soup was still warm in the jar. And tucked underneath the container of chicken, folded small, was a $20 bill. I sat on that curb and I did not eat for a long time. I came back the next day at the same time. I had spent the night in a small motel on the edge of town, where the clerk did not look up from her crossword puzzle when I paid cash, and did not look up when I left in the morning. I had not slept well. I had lain on the thin mattress and thought about my mother's face at the gate, and I had thought about the $20 bill folded under the chicken, and I had thought about the fact that a woman who had not seen her only son in 15 years had looked at a stranger through iron bars and had decided, for reasons she could not have named to anyone including herself, to give him a $20 bill she probably could not afford to give away. Except that she could afford it. That was the part that would not let me sleep. She could afford it because I had made sure she could afford it. and she did not know that. And Vincent and Rachel and Delilah, who were currently spending her money as though it were their own, they did not know it either. They had been drinking from a well for 4 years without ever wondering who dug it. I walked to Magnolia Lane in the same clothes with the same slow steps. This time, when I got to the gate, Vincent was in the yard. He was standing near the front porch with a phone against his ear, and he was gesturing with his free hand the way people gesture when they are trying to sound important to someone who is not impressed. He saw me at the gate. His face did the thing it had done the day before. The look passed, the dismissal in progress, but this time he did not come to the gate. He said something into the phone and walked around the side of the house, and I heard the back door open and shut. My mother came out of the front door within a minute, like she had been waiting for me. She had a small cloth grocery bag this time, blue with a faded flower pattern that I recognized because I had bought it for her at a farmer's market when I was in high school. She came down the walk. She passed the bag through the bars. "Egg salad today," she said, "and 2 apples. There is a bottle of water in there too." "Ma'am, I do not know how to thank you." "You do not have to thank me. You just have to eat." She was about to turn away, and then she stopped. She looked at me for a long moment through the bars, and she said quietly, "How long have you been walking, Ray?" She used the name. Ray, I had told it to Vincent on the first day loud enough that anyone in the front room would have heard it. Vincent had probably not repeated it to her, and she had used it anyway. "A while," I said carefully. "Long enough." "Where are you sleeping?" "There is a motel." "I have a little money, not much," she nodded slowly. She did not ask where the money came from. She did not ask what I was doing in Ashfield. She did not ask why a stranger with a beard and a torn coat had turned up at her gate 2 days in a row. She just nodded, the way you nod when someone tells you something you have already accepted. Then she said, "I have to go back in. Rachel is watching from the window. If I stay too long, she will come out." "Yes, ma'am. Come back tomorrow." "Yes, ma'am." She turned. She walked up the path. This time, before she went inside, she stopped on the porch and she looked back at me, just once. It was a fast look. It was not a searching look. It was a checking look. The kind of look a mother gives a child in a crowded store when she wants to make sure he is still there. And then she went inside. I walked away with the blue bag in my hands. I turned the corner. I did not eat for the 2nd day in a row. I sat behind the same hedge on the same curb, and I opened the bag, and this time there was no $20 bill. This time there was a small folded piece of paper. I opened it. Her handwriting, 3 words. "You look thin." I sat on that curb and I put my head in my hands. The 3rd day I did not walk to Magnolia Lane at the same time. I walked earlier. I got there just after dawn, and I sat on the low stone wall of the Peterson house across the street, hidden behind the corner of their hedge, and I watched my mother's house wake up. Vincent came out first, at 7 in a bathrobe, to smoke a cigarette on the porch. He stood there for 10 minutes looking at his phone. Rachel came out at 7:30 in workout clothes, got into a white SUV parked in the driveway, and drove away. Vincent went back inside. And then at 8:15, a black Cadillac pulled up to the gate, and my Aunt Delilah got out of the passenger side. Delilah was 68 now. She had been 49 when I left. In the 15 years between those 2 numbers, she had become a woman who dressed like she was on her way to a business meeting even when she was walking up her sister-in-law's front path. Cream slacks, a silk blouse the color of dried blood, gold at her throat and at her wrists and at her ears. Hair colored and set. She walked up to the gate, and the man driving the Cadillac, who I recognized after a moment as her second husband, a real estate agent named Curtis Blanchard, punched in a code on the keypad beside the gate. The gate opened. Delilah walked through. Curtis pulled the Cadillac into the driveway behind Rachel's empty spot. I watched them go inside without knocking. I sat on the stone wall for 2 hours. I watched the house. I watched Delilah come out onto the porch at one point with a cup of coffee and stand there talking to Curtis, who had come out to smoke. I watched Vincent join them. The 3 of them stood on the porch of my mother's house for 20 minutes, drinking her coffee, laughing, gesturing toward the yard, toward the roof, toward the driveway, planning something. I could see it in the shape of their conversation, in the way Delilah was pointing and Vincent was nodding and Curtis was making notes on his phone. At 10:30, my mother came out onto the porch. She had a tray with more coffee on it. She set it down on the small side table without speaking to any of them. Delilah did not thank her. Vincent did not look at her. Curtis said something that I could not hear, and my mother did not answer, and she turned and went back inside. She was carrying an empty tray. She had not poured coffee for herself. I got off the wall. I walked up to the gate at 10:45 and I rang the bell. Vincent came off the porch first. His face did the thing again, but this time there was something angrier in it, because Delilah was on the porch, and Delilah was watching him deal with the beggar at the gate. He wanted her to see him handle it. He came down the walk with his shoulders back. "You again," he said. "I told you yesterday there is no help here, move on." Delilah came down the porch steps behind him. She walked up the path in her cream slacks and her silk blouse, and she stood behind Vincent, and she looked at me the way you look at a stain on a carpet. "What is this?" she said, not to me, to Vincent. "Some vagrant. He came yesterday, and the day before. Aunt Mary keeps giving him food. I keep telling her not to." Delilah's mouth did something small and hard. "Aunt Mary is a soft woman. You cannot let her keep encouraging this kind of thing." She turned her eyes on me. "You, listen to me. Do you understand English?" "Yes, ma'am." "Good, then understand this. This is a private home. It belongs to my family. It has belonged to my family for a very long time, and it will not become a stop on some circuit of yours. If I see you at this gate again, I will call the sheriff. Do you understand me?" "Yes, ma'am." "Vincent, take a photograph of him on your phone so we have a record." Vincent took his phone out. He raised it. He took the picture without asking, without warning, the way you photograph a car that hit yours in a parking lot. I looked at the lens. I let him take it. I did not go back to the motel. I walked to a small diner on the far side of town, the kind of place with a payphone still bolted to the outside wall, even though the receiver had been broken off years ago. And I sat in a booth by the window, and I ordered a coffee. I did not drink. Then I went into the bathroom, and I called Wesley on the phone I had kept sewn into the lining of the coat, and I told him to bring the car in 1 hour. I called Marcus in Savannah, and I told him to fly to the regional airport that afternoon with the full file. I called Cornelius in Charlotte, and I told him to send the 2 men we had discussed for the ride along, not to intervene, just to be present. And then I went back to the motel, and I showered for the first time in 3 days, and I shaved off the beard with a straight razor I had not touched since I was 28 years old, and I put on the suit that had been hanging in a garment bag in Wesley's trunk since Tuesday. Charcoal, 3-piece, cut in Milan by a tailor I had used for 4 years, shoes that had not seen a scuff in 6 months, a wristwatch that was worth more than Vincent's country club membership. I looked at myself in the mirror of that motel bathroom, and this time the man looking back was the one I recognized. Wesley picked me up at 3. Marcus met us at a coffee shop off the highway with a leather portfolio under his arm and the calm expression of a man who had been waiting 11 years to hand somebody a certain kind of document. He briefed me in the back of the car while Wesley drove. The deed transfer had been formally invalidated by the county recorder's office 2 weeks ago, on the strength of the forged signature. My mother was, and had always been, the sole owner of the property. The 2 credit cards Vincent had opened in her name had been flagged as fraudulent, and the balances, which came to just under $41,000 between them, had been referred to the district attorney for a decision on whether to pursue identity theft charges. The car loan Rachel had co-signed and abandoned had been paid off in full and closed, with a lien filed against Rachel personally for the amount, and a letter drafted by Marcus and signed by me was ready to be delivered. We turned onto Magnolia Lane at 4:15. The Cadillac was still in the driveway. Rachel's SUV was back. A third car, a red convertible I did not recognize, was parked at the curb. Delilah had brought company. Wesley pulled the Rolls-Royce up to the gate. He stopped. He got out. He walked around to the keypad and he pressed the buzzer. Vincent came to the front window. I could see his face through the glass. He looked at the Rolls-Royce. He looked at Wesley in his black suit and his black cap. He looked at me in the back seat, and his face did not know what it was seeing. It did the calculation of a man watching a stranger step out of a car worth more than the house he was standing in, and then his face did the second calculation, the one where he realized the stranger was not a stranger. He came out onto the porch. He walked slowly. He came down the front walk with a completely different walk than the one I had seen for 3 days, a walk that was trying to be casual and failing. "Can I help you?" he said through the gate. I got out of the car. I stood in front of him in the charcoal suit. I let him look. "Vincent," I said. My voice was clear now, no hoarseness, no performance, just my voice. "Open the gate." His hand went to the keypad. He punched in the code without thinking. The gate swung open. And then his hand froze on the panel because he had recognized me finally, and the recognition was landing in stages, the way things land when the mind is refusing to accept them one layer at a time. "James," he said. "Yes." "James, oh my God, James, we did not, nobody told us you were coming, we would have Rachel. Rachel, come out here right now, James, my God, look at you." I walked past him. I walked past him without stopping. Marcus followed me with the leather portfolio. Wesley stayed at the gate with the 2 men from Charlotte, who had pulled up in a dark sedan and had taken positions at the curb without saying a word to anyone. Rachel came out onto the porch and her face did the same 3-stage calculation Vincent's had done. And then Delilah came out behind her in the cream slacks. And Delilah's face did not calculate anything, because Delilah had recognized me the moment I stepped out of the car, and she had already understood, in the way that certain kinds of people always understand, that the world she had been living in for 4 years was ending in the next 10 minutes. Curtis came out last with a coffee cup in his hand. He looked at Delilah's face. He set the coffee cup down on the porch rail very carefully. I went into the house. I went straight to the kitchen. My mother was at the sink washing a dish. She had heard the voices on the porch, but she had not come out to see. She was standing at the sink with her back to the doorway, and when I said her name, she did not turn around right away. She stood very still for a moment with her hands in the water. Then she turned. She looked at me. She looked at the suit and the clean face and the man standing in her kitchen doorway, and her eyes did not do any calculating at all. Her eyes just filled up. "James," she said, not a question. "Mama, come here, baby." I went to her. She put her wet hands on either side of my face. She looked at me the way she had looked at me on the day I graduated from high school, and on the day I left Ashfield, and on every day in between that I had come home from school with something to tell her. She held my face and she said quietly, so that only I could hear it, "I knew you on the first day, James. A mother knows her son's eyes. I knew you when Vincent was still telling you to move along." I could not speak. "I let you keep going," she said, "because I needed you to see. I needed you to see what they had turned this house into. I have been living with it for 3 years, and no one was ever going to believe me if I said it out loud, so I let you look. And I put the 20 in the bag so you would know I meant it, and I wrote you the note so you would know I was still in here." I put my hands over hers. "I am so sorry, Mama." "You have nothing to be sorry for. You came home." We went into the living room together. Delilah and Rachel and Vincent and Curtis were standing in a loose half-circle in the middle of the room, and every one of them started talking at once when we walked in. Delilah started with the loudest voice, a voice that was working very hard to sound warm and family reunion and delighted, and Vincent started with an apology that had no subject, and Rachel started to cry. My mother lifted one hand, just one hand, the classroom hand. 22 years of third graders had learned to be quiet when Mary Whitfield lifted that hand. The room went quiet. "Sit down," she said. "All of you. Sit down and be quiet, because I am going to talk now, and it is going to be my turn for a long time." They sat. She talked for 40 minutes. She named every incident, the forged signature on the deed, the credit cards in her name, the car loan, the coffee she had poured for people who never thanked her. The night Delilah had told her, in her own kitchen, that she was lucky to have family who would take care of her in her old age. The morning Vincent had called her a stupid old woman for putting sugar in his coffee when he had asked for none. She named it all, and Marcus stood by the fireplace with the portfolio and did not need to open it because my mother was the document. They left that night, 1 suitcase each. Wesley drove them to the county line and turned around. The gates stayed open after that. My mother said gates were for people who did not trust their neighbors. She was right about that, She had always been right.